Hey everybody, it's Talia. I am super excited because I'm going to start a bit of a tutorial series. I don't know if I'll be able to do it super often, but I really want to start getting tutorials out there for you guys. I'm not an expert, but I have learned some things and I've picked up stuff along the way, and I know that I personally have been helped by people sharing what they have learned along their artistic journeys, even though they're not experts either. So I wanted to kind of show you what I've kind of muddled my way through, stuff that I've learned, stuff that I have learned and then been like, doesn't really work for me, but maybe I could tell you about it. See if you might resonate with something that I have to share with you. So first off, I have some figure drawing proportions to go over. I have this little guy here that I drew a little face and hair on. He looked sad without it, so I wanted to give him a little happy face. Some of you may have seen this before. It is a basic figure drawing proportions chart, and I just did one up real quick. It's a sketch. It's not perfect. But the basic proportion rule is that most adults are 7.5 heads tall. So if you take the size of their own head here and stack it on top of itself like this, it'll be 7.5 times for the base of their feet to the top of their head. And then from there you can break it down to the different spots where different parts of their body are supposed to land on that scale. Of course, this is like a general rule thing. There is some wishy-washiness depending on like proportions of people, what size they are. There's taller people, there's shorter people, and so some people can be 7 heads or 8 heads or 4 heads tall or 9, so it really depends on the person that you're drawing. So it's a very general rule, but it's helpful to kind of get your head around especially like how long arms are supposed to be in comparison to the torso, and like if you draw something and you're like, these legs look really weird, but I can't figure out why. It's like, well, maybe you drew the calf too small, or like your feet are way too big, or like your shoulders are too wide apart, and so your head looks weird, that kind of thing. So it helps to get an understanding of what a like one ideal version of a body would look like, so that you can then go from there and like stretch and morph the rules to fit different body types. So I'm just going to go over this chart real quickly with you guys. Basically, you can, to start drawing this kind of thing, you start with the head shape. And what I usually do is I actually draw a circle here, and then I draw the chin underneath, just so that you don't have to draw the actual shape itself right off the bat. And then once you have your head in there, what I like to do is I just draw like a straight line. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but a line down to where you want the feet to be. And in order to guesstimate that, you have to kind of picture how long or how tall the body is supposed to be in comparison to the head size that you just drew. So if you draw a head this big, then you can like literally measure with your pencil. If you take the end of your pencil and put it at the top of the head, you can put your finger down and measure where that bottom of the chin is, and just move your way down, and then get to the bottom where you're supposed to have that bottom line at. Or you can just kind of guesstimate it. You get kind of better at understanding where that line is supposed to go after practicing for a while. So you got your straight line down to the bottom, just so you have a general reference point of how far down it's supposed to be. Then from there, the good thing to do is to put in shoulders and hips first, because that will help you get a structure, and then you can connect those lines between the head and the shoulders and the hips, and then the hips and down through the legs. So shoulders in general are usually right about the 1.5 heads. So if you find where the second head is at and then go halfway, that's about where the shoulders are going to line up. And what I like to do is just to draw circles here for where the shoulder, I guess you could say like where the ball of your shoulder is. You're not drawing literally like oh, this is the exact point where it turns. It's just kind of to give you a reference point of where that's supposed to be. And then a line connecting the two. And then the same thing for the hips. Your hips are bigger, so you can do wider or longer, I guess, circles, and then connecting the two. And since we are straight on with this figure, there isn't like an upward angle or a downward camera angle, and they are standing very rigidly, these are going to be straight lines here. If they were standing, like if they had one shoulder up here, then this line would be angled, and then like if this hip was down here, then you could angle it like that. But for this just general chart, everything is straight on. From there, then what I like to do is kind of add in where I want the arms and legs to go. And by doing this, we're just going to draw basically a stick figure. The basic like little kid stick figure of like this with then the arms and legs coming off is almost exactly what I mean. But we're just adding, which we already did, adding space for the shoulders and the hips. So it's going to look kind of like that. So from there, we're just going to draw, that's where the top of the arm is. There's the elbow, there's the bottom of the arm, and the hand. And the same thing on the other side. Top of the arm, elbow's right there, bottom of the arm, and then that's where the hand is. Pretty easy. You're just kind of like drawing the lines for the bones, balls for the joints. And then the same thing here. And I'm not drawing, if you notice, I'm not drawing the outside of the arm where it's supposed to be. I'm drawing like the inside of the actual arm. So the same thing for the legs, connecting from the hip down, and then your knee there, hip down to the knee, and then down to your feet. And I usually just draw little triangles for the feet because it's easy to signify for feet when you're straight on. And honestly, feet are hard enough to draw without any sort of reference point to begin with. So it's really easy to, like, if you just draw them in, then you have at least something on there that you can manipulate and figure out what's wrong with it. If you just try and like straight up draw a foot out of nowhere, it's going to be a little bit disastrous, at least from my experience. So then you've just got like your basic skeleton here. See, I have it on a different layer. See, then we've got, it looks like a human shape, you know? It's not like perfect, and it obviously doesn't look like an actual full figure, but we have a basic understanding of where the arms and legs are supposed to go, that kind of thing. So then from there, you can add in these outside lines that I've done for the rest of the figure. The way you do that is it's lots of kind of understanding of anatomy comes into it, and over time gets easier. But just like basic stuff here, you can actually see I've actually done the collarbone here a little bit. If you draw a little V where the shoulder line meets this straight line coming down, draw a V there. The collarbone actually comes up like this at an angle. And that'll give you just kind of a little bit of bone structure to work off of, like this, and goes out and meets the outside of the shoulders, which then comes down, and the neck comes up and meets the head. And I'm going to make another video actually going over like the basics of head proportions, so don't worry about that right now, because face and features are a whole nother story. But then we have the elbow where the arm actually comes out just a little bit here of an angle, and then back in to meet up with the wrist. Another thing is generally your arm isn't going to be entirely separate from your torso because it connects there. And just because it literally only connects at the shoulder, most of the time people don't have their arms completely separate from their body. Sometimes if there's a more dynamic pose, then they will. But most of the time it's either going to be in front or behind the actual majority of the torso. So the way that I usually try and figure out where that line is supposed to be is by actually drawing the rest of the arm going up. Like, okay, so that's where the armpit is. But it's actually behind this torso bit. which is where it's lining up in front. So it just kind of gives me a better idea of where that is supposed to actually fall behind. And so I don't accidentally draw in the wrong spot because I'm trying to picture it wrong. You can literally draw the lines and then erase them. And then the same thing for the other side. So this comes out down here, goes out a little bit for the elbow, same thing on the other side. And again, the torso comes in front. This also isn't probably the most perfect like male body. This is supposed to be, but I think the hips are probably just a little bit wide for that, but that's okay. Everybody has different bodies, so we can just kind of go with it. So then the outside of the leg is going to be like a gentle curve coming down from the hip all the way down to the knee. And usually where this ball of the knee is, I draw a little V at the bottom of it here. Same thing on this side, little bottom of it. And this long line of the leg actually comes down and should look like it's about to meet this V. Not actually literally meet it, but it is heading in that same direction. Like imaginary line is connecting the two of them. So then the same thing on the other side comes around here and looks like it's about to meet that V. And then the inside of legs are a little bit straighter, not as curved, comes down. And then the calf, actually, where the majority of the calf is where you're going to put the roundest part of it. So if somebody's leg was actually, so if that's the knee and it is facing this way, like facing that way, you can connect the knee to the outside of the leg. There's the inside of the leg. And then your calf is actually, the majority of it is going to be back here like this. And then the foot's going to come down like that. But in this case, since we are straight on, I usually put the calf on the outside to kind of show where the majority of that muscle is. And then same thing on the other side, put the majority of it on the outside and make sure you come in far enough for the ankle. It gets smaller than I always think it should. And then for the inside of the leg, it's also sloping just a little bit, but not like quite as drastically, and then come in for the ankle at the bottom. So that's just like basic proportions and basic how I usually do it. Here, I'll take away this bottom layer. See, so now we've got a little person. This method for me is the most helpful for checking what I've done, and if there's something that I don't like or am trying to figure out what's wrong with it, going back to figuring out like, okay, well, how big is this head? Like, is the head actually too big in comparison to everything else? In which case you can just shrink the head a little bit, or try and figure out the easiest way to kind of fix where the proportion is wrong. And coming back to this chart is helpful for figuring out what actually is wrong to begin with. However, it does fall apart just a little bit because it is the best and most useful for straight-on figures. And almost nothing that's dynamic or super like interesting, or if you wanted to do like an action scene, or you want to show like how like fun your character is, you're probably not going to do just like a straight-on full body shot. Like that's not the best way to express their personality, in that way. So when you change the angle, so if we have, if this is straight on here and the camera is just looking right at it, if we move the angle up here and we start looking down at it a little bit, then something called foreshortening happens, which if you're not familiar with that term, that means basically that things that are closer to the eye of the viewer, which is basically anybody who's looking at the piece, things that are closer is going to be bigger. You guys have probably all seen pieces of people who are standing and here's their shoulders here, standing like this. Here's a basic little sketch. Okay, I forgot the hips. They're standing here and they have their arm outstretched and their hand is like here in the very front very badly, sketchily drawn hand, but you get the point. Their hand is like really close to the camera, and then the rest of them is really small here in the background. That's foreshortening, where the focus of the camera is on the thing that's closest, and the things that's closest is biggest, and everything behind it kind of gets smushed and smaller because of that. So I want to show you like an example of that. I have some pieces here of reference. Here we go. Let's do this one. So this is just a picture of me, a nice little selfie. And drawing from reference is one of the best ways to figure stuff out and try and learn how the human body works and functions. A good way to do that is by tracing, as long as you it's your picture or you have permission to do so. So an example of foreshortening here. We have, I'm going to change this so we can see just a little bit better. Color, let's do pink. So first off, here's just basic head shape. And my head is here turned a little bit, so kind of indicate that with those lines. And then the neck comes down, and then if we do our shoulders here, so here is shoulder there, and then a line connecting them. And you notice I already did it a little bit. This circle here is bigger than this one, and that's because this shoulder is much closer than this one is over here. And then hips down here, there's a hip connecting them. And you can see here that this arm coming down, imagine it keeps going, compared to this arm here, there's the elbow coming down, the hand. This arm here is much, much bigger than this one over here. And that's what I mean by foreshortening. So, and this isn't like a super dynamic picture either, you know, like it's fine. It's kind of an upward angle. It's, you know, it's a traditional kind of selfie look, but it's not like really, really drastic or anything like that. But most everything that you see in real life has foreshortening, and it kind of makes it look more realistic and more dynamic and like there's actual living life in it. So that's the issue of working with something like our little guy here, is because if it's straight on and you just have here we go. If you just have straight lines all the way across, up and down, then it does not going to look like an actual real life person. So the idea then is to try and figure out how these rules are being broken. And I'll go over that more because this video is already long enough. But once you have down, like, okay, here's where this goes, here's where that goes, they connect. Then this is here, they connect. Here's where I want this leg and this leg to go. And then this is the basic size of how big the feet should be. Here's where the elbow is supposed to go. That's how big the hand is. Once you get like basic proportions of that down, that's when you can start playing with it and moving things around. So then it can be like, okay, well, I want actually this shoulder to be up here and this one to be down here. And then, you know, kind of do like an off-kilter look. So then we're gonna have this hip up here, that down there. And then I can like have this arm over here at the elbow, and then I can have hand on the hip. And then this one's going to actually go down behind the torso here. So you're just going to see a little bit of the hand, you know, and we're going to have the hip come out like this. You know, so then you can start playing with and manipulating those proportions to kind of figure out how you want to change it and make it more dynamic of a pose. So that's basic proportions, basic idea of things. I hope it was a little bit helpful. I'll go more in depth into specific parts of different parts of the body, things like that. I know that the face is one of those things that's like you kind of got it or you kind of don't got it. So I'll go over that too. But I hope this gives you a basic overview of kind of how artists think about it, a method to go about it, things like that. And I hope you're encouraged to keep drawing and to keep going. And this is one of those things that figure drawing for me did not come naturally. And so I want to encourage you to like just keep pushing and keep trying to figure out how you can do it and what works best for you. And let me know in the comments or on Instagram or wherever if it was helpful, or if you have questions. I can go more in depth in more videos on different things. I'd love to have feedback. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys around next time.